In the peaceful village of Willowbrook, nestled between towering mountains and dense forests, a young girl named Emma lived with her family. The village, known for its warm and welcoming community, was a place where everyone knew each other, and nature was revered. Emma, a bright and curious girl, spent most of her days exploring the woods with her closest companion, a sleek gray cat named Whisker. Whisker had come into Emma's life one stormy evening, when the skies opened up and rain poured heavily. Emma had been outside, playing near the village outskirts, when she heard the faint cries of a kitten. Following the sound, she found a small, shivering kitten huddled beneath a bush. Without a second thought, Emma scooped him up and rushed home, where she dried him off and gave him warm milk. From that day on, Whisker became her shadow, following her wherever she went. The villagers often marveled at the bond between Emma and Whisker. They were inseparable, and Whisker had an unusual intelligence that made many believe he was more than just a regular cat. He would sit by Emma's side as she read, follow her to the village market, and even seem to understand when she spoke to him. Emma, in turn, trusted Whisker completely, confiding in him like he was her best friend. But no one knew then just how much Whisker would come to mean to Emma, and how one day, his loyalty would be tested in ways no one could have imagined. One late autumn day, the sky above Willowbrook began to darken unexpectedly. What started as a peaceful morning quickly turned ominous as the wind picked up and the air grew dry. Unbeknownst to the villagers, a lightning storm had ignited a fire deep in the forest that surrounded their homes. At first, no one noticed the danger, but as the afternoon wore on, a faint smell of smoke began to drift into the village. Then came the news that sent a wave of fear through the tight-knit community. A forest fire was spreading, fast and fierce, and it was heading toward Willowbrook. The village sprang into action. Men and women gathered what they could carry, loading their carts and preparing to flee. Children were ushered indoors, and everyone worked together to ensure the elderly and infirm would be safe. The wind carried the fire toward them, and soon, the sky was tinged with a fiery orange glow. But in the midst of the chaos, Emma's parents realized something terrifying. Emma was nowhere to be found. She had gone out to the woods that morning, as she often did, with Whisker by her side. Now, as the flames crept closer, there was no sign of her. Emma had wandered deeper into the forest than usual that day, chasing after Whisker as he playfully darted between the trees. She had no idea of the danger approaching, too caught up in her game with her beloved cat. But as the day wore on, the air grew hotter, and Emma began to notice something unusual. The birds had stopped singing, and an eerie silence had settled over the woods. It wasn't until she saw the thick smoke curling through the trees that she realized something was terribly wrong. Panic gripped her as she tried to retrace her steps, but the smoke grew thicker, and she could no longer tell which direction led back to the village. Whisker, sensing her fear, stayed close, his green eyes scanning the forest. As Emma stumbled through the underbrush, she tripped over a fallen branch, twisting her ankle painfully. She cried out in pain, tears stinging her eyes as she tried to stand. But it was no use. She couldn't walk. Whisker circled around her, meowing urgently as if trying to encourage her to move. But Emma was trapped, unable to go any farther. She could feel the heat of the approaching fire, and fear tightened her chest. She didn't know what to do. Back in the village, a search party had been formed to find Emma. But with the fire advancing, it was too dangerous to send anyone deep into the forest. Emma's parents were frantic, but the villagers had to prioritize getting everyone to safety. The flames were moving too fast. Just when all hope seemed lost, a familiar figure appeared at the edge of the woods. It was Whisker. His fur was singed, and his eyes were wild with urgency. He sprinted toward the group, pausing only to glance back toward the forest, as if trying to tell them something. Emma's father, understanding that Whisker was leading them to his daughter, grabbed a lantern and followed the brave cat into the trees. Whisker led him through the smoke-filled forest, weaving through the thick underbrush with precision. The fire raged around them, but Whisker didn't slow down. Whisker led Emma's father to the clearing where Emma lay, frightened and injured. Relief flooded through him as he scooped his daughter into his arms, but the danger was far from over. The fire had spread quickly, and their escape route was blocked by a burning tree that had fallen across the path. The heat was unbearable, and the flames crackled hungrily as they edged closer. Emma's father knew they had to move, but with the tree blocking their way, there was no way out. That's when Whisker acted. With a fierce determination, the small cat darted toward the burning tree, ignoring the flames that licked at his fur. He leapt onto the fallen trunk, his agile body knocking the smaller branches aside. The fire engulfed him, but his efforts created just enough space for Emma and her father to squeeze through. Emma's father rushed through the opening Whisker had made, carrying his daughter to safety. As they stumbled back toward the village, they could feel the intense heat of the fire behind them, but they didn't stop until they were far enough from the flames. When they finally reached the village, Emma's mother ran to them, tears streaming down her face. Emma was safe, but when they looked back toward the forest, Whisker was gone. He had given everything to save Emma and her father. The villagers worked tirelessly to extinguish the fire, but the damage was done. The forest had been scarred, and amidst the blackened trees, they found Whisker's body, still by the fallen tree he had knocked aside. His fur was scorched, but his face was peaceful, as though he had known this was his purpose. Days passed, and the village mourned the loss of their brave, selfless hero. A small memorial was built in the forest to honor Whisker, and Emma visited it often, leaving flowers by the stone that bore his name. Though Whisker was gone, his spirit remained alive in the hearts of the villagers. His story of courage, sacrifice, and loyalty spread far and wide, inspiring those who heard it to be braver, kinder, and more selfless in their own lives. Emma, though heartbroken, knew that Whisker would always be with her. She told his story to anyone who would listen, ensuring that the memory of her brave cat would never fade.